It's a couple minutes before 8 p.m., so we're a little bit early, but welcome to Wrestling Chat with Friends. I am your host, Cheats. As always, WCWF is brought to you by the Family Podcast Network. And as always, I am joined by my ride or die right here, Elliot the Collector. Elliot, how you feel, buddy?
I'm here, I am present, I am accounted for, and I'm accountable. Hope you're doing well. Hope everyone's doing well out there. Let me just real quick before I do have a collector's choice. Let me say Tuesday's show that we did 2 nights ago with Mark. We kind of came to a halt when we found out about the death of Jay Briscoe, which we'll be talking about in just a minute. And it really took all the steam out of my sails. We had covered a lot of WWE business topics with Vince. And then the news broke by a Facebook user, which you confirmed. And it just sort of sent me into a dark place. We had already started the show by talking about mental health with Kevin Nash. So overall, Tuesday, I want to just sort of like quick apology, even though I don't need to apologize. But Tuesday's show was a little bit darker than we like to do it here at the Family Podcast Network. Important topics nonetheless. And again, we'll talk about Jay. But continue to watch us on Tuesdays and Thursdays on Facebook, YouTube, on our Twitter at WCWF Pod. We'll talk about Jay. He was a great tag team wrestler with his brother. I don't have any Jay Briscoe memorabilia or any really new memorabilia this week because my January crate box has not come in yet. But in honor of a great tag team wrestler gone way too soon, a title he never held, but a tag team title nonetheless, a replica WWE tag team title, one of many belts I've collected over the years. You've seen them all. But good to be here on a Thursday. Let's talk. Let's get it on.
Let's talk and let's get it on. Well said, Elliot, as always. And we are going to start with the sudden and tragic passing of Jay Briscoe. Wrestled all over the world. I guess we should start by saying, husband, father, brother, family member, but a beloved, in many ways, a beloved wrestler in the locker room. Jay was 38 years old. He passed away suddenly in a car accident. Obviously, the driver of the other vehicle, now is reported, has also passed away. And their 12-year-old daughter, Jay Briscoe's 12-year-old daughter, had surgery. It does look like at this point, everything is very touch and go, but it does look like everybody's optimistic in regards to her surviving the car accident, which is a whole other world of issues that a 12-year-old and their family will have to deal with. So there's so many ways we can go with this, but I think most people, especially anyone that would be listening for the AEW part of WCWF on a Thursday, would probably be most familiar with the Briscoe brothers from what they've been doing recently in their runs in the Indies and Ring of Honor, but working with a lot of AEW talent, including FTR, in some really, really dream matches. They had a dream run in 2022 and had the epic dog collar. Was that in December? That was in December, I guess, that finished up
Just about the end of the year.
trilogy, the dog collar match. In which they won the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championship, the Briscoe brothers. So Jay was currently the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champion as well. So tragedy all around. I will say this. I was not as familiar with the Briscoe brothers until probably last year when they had some epic GCW stuff. The promos they were cutting back and forth, cross promotional with FTR leading up to the Ring of Honor stuff. It's very clear that the Briscoes was in one of the best runs of their lives during this time. However, that definitely does not do justice to an outstanding career that basically I think spanned 2 decades. There's footage of both Briscoe brothers wrestling when they were 18 years old. So this is a group that has been on a lot of people's radars for a very long time and has delivered some of the best tag team matches, some of the most brutal tag team matches in the history of the sport. I'm going to go to you, Elliot, and ask you, when you think of Jay Briscoe and you think of the Briscoe brothers, I know you think of tag team wrestling once. I will say I did see footage of a Jay Briscoe beating a Kevin Steen in Ring of Honor for the Ring of Honor. I believe it was a championship at the time, and at the time, it was massive pop. Briscoe goes over and wins the title over Kevin Steen, who is everybody knows is Kevin Owens. But what's your first memories of the Briscoe brothers and Jay Briscoe in regards to in ring persona kind of promo? They were great at promos. What's your just kind of overall reflection of Jay Briscoe?
They were, as you mentioned, known the world around. They wrestled in Japan. They wrestled for NWA. They didn't have any WWE impact, so they weren't on television a whole lot. What they were, however, were Ring of Honor originals, legends. I mean, they were tag teaming and wrestling as singles when CM Punk was in Ring of Honor, when Samoa Joe was in Ring of Honor, when Bryan Danielson was in Ring of Honor, when Tyler Black, who we know as Seth Rollins, was in Ring of Honor. Reading the tributes on social media in the last 24 hours to see the breadth of who has spoken out, from, as you said, Kevin Owens, Kevin Steen, to Tyler Black, Seth Rollins, to everyone in AEW. They had sort of made their mark in AEW a little bit, albeit not appearing on TV for them. They were mentioned
on camera, right?
Mentioned a few times here and there when talking about Ring of Honor, especially when Tony bought Ring of Honor last year. It was reported quickly after that sale that Warner had made some overtures to Tony, basically saying we don't want the Briscoes on our network, which did end up happening. They were never featured. We will not see what the Briscoes could have done in a repackaged ROH project. We know Mark. I'm sure Mark will at some point address the wrestling universe and make some sort of return. Now is not the time to even think about anything like that. We're just thinking about the family right now. But I think about them as a, kind of like the Young Bucks, like the biggest, before AEW, the biggest tag team that really no one really knew about unless you were a diehard. Diehard fans found Ring of Honor where they could. Ring of Honor had a TV contract sort of with access, but they weren't as available as WWE or AEW, and they were for WCW, but they just weren't on TV. But their characters, who were not everyone's cup of tea, they had this very unique characters as these brothers who sort of. I'm not going to put labels on how you describe them, but it was really a kind of down home country feel to them. They just looked like two guys who all they cared about was fighting and family. And I think that sort of sums up the Briscoe brothers: family first, and just a couple of guys who will go out there and fight with anybody. And they did, all with everybody. It's a big loss to the wrestling world. I warmed up to the Briscoes in the last couple of years, seeing some of their matches, like you mentioned with FTR. Was it a title match? I mean, they wrestled the Rock and Roll Express last year. They wrestled Ricky and Robert in their late 60s and made them look. Both of them made each other look great. So the Briscoes obviously could go as good as anyone. When I think it was, I don't remember if it was Mark or Jay. Did Jay beat Kevin Steen for the Ring of Honor? Well, they may have.
It was Jay. So
they both didn't hold world titles, did they? I don't think
so.
Did.
So I think they were 13-time Ring of Honor tag team champions, and then Jay won the world heavyweight title once. Yeah.
They are Ring of Honor Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
they were inducted. So yeah, this is as big a probably loss of wrestling if you're not talking about someone who's featured on TV every week. Short of that, they were as big. They were probably as big, especially, and they were apparently beloved by their fellow competitors.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And I hate to get into speculation, but we will for the sake of this.
What we do here.
And one of the things I always wondered was, do you go all the way through 2023 without the Briscoes showing up on AEW and on television? Now, Discovery Warner, however you want to call it, did give, it seems to be, and we'll get into this a little bit, that they gave the order from on high that they did not want the Briscoes on air, and we'll tell you why. About a decade ago, if you go through, that's what you always say: be careful about what you tweet. But
Mm-hmm.
about a decade ago, the Briscoe brothers were seen, kind of documented. It was pretty obvious with some very homophobic, transphobic tweets.
Yep.
And those tweets kind of raised an eye of controversy, and it did. And it was one of those things where Discovery, Warner, and big companies like that were like, hey, look, we don't want to do business with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing is, and you alluded to this as well, Elliot, the locker room seemed to have really, really accepted whether it was their apology. They did apologize for it publicly. I'm sure it took some time. These are 10 years ago, and we're not as Twitter savvy even then as we are now in regards to how to make apologies. But they did apologize, and then they did some locker room stuff and conversations and camaraderie. I'm not saying that they did the work. I'm not saying that they were changed men, but there are very popular gay wrestlers, the leading one being Effie, who wrote some pretty positive things about the Briscoe brothers. They were shown with kind of Jay was memorialized in the last couple of days or so forth online by wrestlers of all backgrounds, all races. So it was a really interesting dynamic. So I'll go back to ask you, do you think you go through 2023 with the momentum that they had, pretty much the biggest tag team not on TV, biggest tag team outside of the two majors per se, and not put the Briscoe brothers on TV in AEW?
Yeah, I think that was going to happen. I think the bed was made. The decision was made by Time Warner that we were not going to. It's one thing to make right with the locker room. It's one thing for the locker room to accept. When he was remorseful for what he said. He kind of, if you say all the right things, it didn't seem to hinder them in their careers, short of making it onto one of the bigger promotions. They still traveled Japan. They worked regularly in all divisions. They were forgiven. They were forgiven.
No, I'll push back on you on the sense that I think it hindered them huge. I think it hindered them big time in their careers, because I think they would have been on television had it not been for this controversy. I think they would have got picked up somewhere.
I think as independent wrestlers, and it didn't hinder them as independent wrestlers. They had the career. They continued to ascend in their careers. They were getting booked everywhere. They were among the most popular. Who's to say if they were WWE material, if either party ever had any interest? I'm not sure. But yes, it this hindered them, and things like that will hinder you when it comes to big corporations. Time Warner wasn't gonna forget or forgive. They felt like it was, the risk reward was too high, and that's just that's their decision to make. That is for the Briscoes to have to deal with. And I think if Tony had his druthers, he would have found a way to have the Briscoes on. But
that's what I think.
I'm sure. And we'll talk about what happened on Wednesday too. But yes, I think Tony wanted to have them be a part of the AEW Ring of Honor Corporation. Time Warner put the kibosh on it as soon as he bought Ring of Honor, and Tony probably was not going to be able to win that battle. And as we found out, even with this tragedy, there still was a battle that sort of happened behind the scenes that we'll talk about that still didn't go their way. So because of even that, no, I don't think they were ever bound for. What the best case scenario was, Tony makes whatever the Ring of Honor project ends up being. If it was going to be a show that did not have its own TV deal, it was on the internet, on some net, however else it would have been, the Briscoes would have been prominently featured, but it was never going to be on a Time Warner owned station.
I think that part of it boils down to leverage. Let's just be honest right now. Tony Khan doesn't have any leverage when it comes to Warner. I think they've got a good show and a good product and a good ratings, situation not in regards to what's happening kind of trending wise, but overall, I think they have a good ratings situation for the Warner folks, but it's not a situation in which Tony Khan by any means has the company by the cojones, if you will.
That's right. Not at
So
all.
so without any leverage, I definitely think he says, he takes it as it comes when it comes to putting the
Hmm.
Briscoes on TV. I do think I think we both agree is if he had his choice, he would put the Briscoes on AEW television and put the Briscoes on on the AEW pay per views as well. With that said, I can't help but to think of what could have been had this hadn't caused major kind of issues with sponsors and so forth. And let's not sugarcoat what the tweets were. And
Hmm.
and I do say tweets because they were multiple tweets
Yeah.
at this time. Like I said, it was about a decade ago, but it was not just one isolated tweet that was taken down and deleted. There were several, series of tweets that um, the kind of the community felt was as offensive. Felt was
Hmm.
offensive, and they were offensive. I
Absolutely.
think I think he tried to make light of it, saying, "Hey, I was in character. This is the character that I play in the wrestling world." When that did not did not satisfy anyone, he did, like I said, he did kind of go around and make amends, apologize publicly, donated some salaries to causes that were in promotion of the LGBTQ community. So it was just an interesting kind of dichotomy. Let's talk about what happened though on last night in regards to Dynamite. Now, everybody knows Tony Khan owns AEW and he owns Ring of Honor. The
Hmm.
Briscoes are prominent tag team champions in Ring of Honor. They never make TV. Everyone kind of expected though, since Tony Khan owned both companies, and let's just be frank, the Briscoes were never a WWE contracted. They weren't ever WWE wrestlers. WWE is not going to do any kind of J tribute per se.
Right.
NXT, to their credit, did have a really nice moment of their show when they heard he passed
Hmm.
and said a few nice things and well wishes to his family. Very short. AEW starts with a photo, memorandum photo, kind of
Yep.
memorial photo,
Yep.
and basically that's it. The only thing else other than that was I think at the end of the show in the closing, the
Hmm.
announcers said that they were thinking about the family of the Briscoes. There were a
Yeah.
lot of wrestlers that wore kind of J armbands. I know Daniel Bryant wore one, but very mum is the word in regards to Jay Briscoe Memorial, especially coming off of them having experience of pulling together a really awesome tribute show for Brody Lee after his sudden passing. Before I get into the reasons why, just on the surface, Elliot, were you surprised watching the show that there was not more done for Jay Briscoe?
No, I'm not surprised. The opening graphic to start the show was appropriate. If all the talent had come out and they had done a 10 bell ring salute,
Yep.
like that all the talent coming out, that would have felt like what you've seen WWE do.
Yep.
I'm not saying
Absolutely.
it would. I'm not saying that would be wrong. I'm not saying a 10 bell count would have been wrong. It would have been a little odd just because for the fan who's not diehard, they may not even know who this guy was. So to see all the talent come out and there be a 10 ring, I don't think that would have been that visual as a fan would have been nice, but I wasn't expecting that. I liked that Excalibur mentioned it to close the show. I would have expected, I could have seen going as a bumper going into or out of a commercial, a 90-second put together tribute, but like there was probably, wherever decisions are made, we're not going to show we're not showing their matches. We're not going to show clips of them. If that decision was made, then I think they got out of what they could get out of it. It really didn't surprise me. Again, because they were never featured on AEW TV, much more than what happened would have seemed odd for a television show. But they're always awkward positions, but no, I really did. I expected the graphic in the beginning. I expected some words, in the opening or at the end. We got it at the end, and I could have expected one graphic or one interview with somebody, but a tribute show would have totally seemingly been out of left field for me.
I agree with you for the most part. I do think that because of the recent relationship with FTR, if it was not like the full roster, like on the on the podium to start the show, I would have thought possibly that there would have been an FDR Mike moment,
Sure.
where they do some promo stuff, but they really just do like a quick like J type thing, right?
FTR probably wasn't, contracted for the show because they're sort of off.
They were not.
But it would have if something could have been put together, taped for it. But also maybe these guys didn't want to feel like if we're not going to do it the way we want to do it, we're not going to do it the same way. And then we find out they were.
Well, there's
calls from high above.
There's more to this story. It is being reported. We are not the dirt sheets. We don't know. But it was being reported that Warner was like, hey, look, there's going to be no tribute kind of.
Tony went to Warner or made the request for, like, can we do it? I don't know if he flat out asked, but
yeah, I don't know.
Inquired within about the potential for any sort of tribute.
But they were like, no.
Put the kibosh on it.
The answer was no. We've avoided this. We don't want to step into any can of worms by doing so, even in his passing. And so, we got what we got last night, and from what I understand, that's all we're gonna get.
Well, yes and no.
No, I'm not done. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
The second part of this is Tony did get approval to do a full tribute, like an hour tribute that they taped after the show that will be available on Ring of Honor Club. So that's where you're going to get, and that's appropriate. That's the appropriate landing spot for the current tag team champions of Ring of Honor, is Ring of Honor's kind of Honor Club, digital showcase for now. But yes, anything about this surprise you in any way?
No, not really. Not really. The amount of attention it got on TV yesterday was appropriate. I like the NXT. That's appropriate for, that's just the business, acknowledging the business. I like that they were able, and again, this happened on Tuesday. Wednesday is a live taping. There's only so much scrambling you can do. Bringing in more Ring of Honor talent, that's not easy to do. But the fact that they put together a show afterwards that they'll make available on the Ring of Honor Club, but free for anybody to be able to watch it. And I'm sure down the road there will be an event, if not multiple events, with proceeds and stuff. There will be a tribute show in addition to what was filmed last night to be shown. I'm sure the indie scene will do something right for when they're free of the constraints of any corporate permissions. Lots of small promotions will have anywhere he appeared will have an independent show dedicated to him, where a portion will probably go. That you can expect that probably throughout 2023.
Yeah, I think it's a big hole in the wrestling community. Obviously, as we wrap this, I will recommend anyone that can find it or watch it. The last dog collar match at the Ring of Honor pay-per-view between FTR and the Briscoes clearly stole the show. I will say this: that was a theme in 2022 for anyone that followed anything that the Briscoes were doing. Whatever card they were on, those two guys stole the show. Like, I remember the GCW tag. Everybody thought it was going to be FTR or someone to the mystery partners to take out the Briscoes, and it wound up being Nick Gage and someone else. But it was like whatever they did,
like they were not quite like Nick Gage, Necro Butcher, hardcore, but they were close. Pretty close. But like they were also tremendous professional wrestlers. Like they could do all the moves. They could do the high moves. That great performers.
They really did. So obviously, well wishes to his family. In this really, really challenging time for them. Really brutal.
Sure.
2023, 19 days in, we've gotten some really good highs, but we've gotten some brutal news when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to health and life and death and some of those things. So we're gonna move on as best we can. Talk a little bit about last night's AEW Dynamite show, kind of what's going on, big picture wise with AEW. Where do we see some of these dominoes falling? I thought last night's show, let's just be frank, and we also know that AEW is challenged right now in regards to trending. We talked a little bit briefly about the lack of leverage Tony Khan probably has. If anything, it's going in the wrong direction in regards to trends and ratings for Tony Khan. However, they have put on some amazing matches. Let's talk about last night. One of the things that stood out to me, the first thing that stood out to me was that I don't exactly know what we're doing with the executive VPs, but Chris Jericho put over Action Andretti, and now there's kind of this rivalry between the two. And last night, the Young Bucks, after coming off of 7 matches with the Lucha Brothers and Death Triangle, they win match 7 to get the trios titles. They go head to head with Top Flight, and they lose the match clean. So I kind of put in the group chat at the time 2 questions. Are we surprised about this course of kind of putting younger, newer guys over? And is it working? Is it working for the wrestling community? Are these guys ready to be in a position where they're getting these big wins and ultimately, hopefully challenging for titles and doing other things?
So, I saw this earlier. 970,000 last night was a preliminary number. That's close to 1 million. That's closer to 1 million they've gotten in probably a few weeks.
In a little while,
I think there was a
Briscoe bump.
Yeah, the trend has not reversed yet.
Yeah.
It's still, they're still sort of treading water, but they're not drowning, I wouldn't say, but they're not making the leaps that I think everyone would want to see.
I will say about last night really quickly is not only did I tune in, which I usually watch on record and catch up, I tuned in last night at 8:00 and specifically to see what they were going to do for Jay Briscoe.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people might have been that way, and it might have gotten them the 970.
For sure. I think I was somewhere in the first match with your friend Jay Lethal there and OC, that for everything
Lethal.
For everything AEW's kind of gone through in the last year with lots of stars who people have been familiar with in the past. Look at their current champions roster.
Mm-hmm.
It is homegrown for all intents and purposes. I mean, when you Darby, OC, MJF, the Acclaimed, and Jade. That is bucking the trend and bucking the sort of reputation that AEW carried for the good, deservedly so, for the good part of the year and a half. So there is young talent that can clearly carry the show and deliver the ratings they're getting. Is elevating Top Flight to the number 1 contender right now. That's not going to put you over 1 million. But I think when you have this large talent roster, and again, the idea of the business is to develop new stars. What I hope is happening is, and whether this, I don't know how much of the Young Bucks putting over Top Flight with Jericho putting over Andretti, how much that has to do with any lessons learned from the brawl out in September, or who knows. I like to think that if that's part of it, are people learning lessons, or people figuring things out, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is you've got to see sort of it's why you play your scrubs at the end of games. It's why you call up your minor leaguers in September for the last month of the year. Sometimes you gotta want to know what you have, and you want to test things. So I like seeing it, because if you just have these young guys who can do anything but end up being squashed by the popular team at the end, giving them really no hope for the future, that's a recipe that doesn't work a long time in wrestling. We've seen that. So I'm all for it, but it's that healthy balance of when you still got to have your Moxleys and your Hangmans, when you got to just let MJF go on a really long winning streak and not drop the title to Bryan Danielson next month. is Top Flight the next tag team that'll hold the titles? I don't think so, but I like that they're getting wins, and mostly just to see how's the crowd going to react. But I don't want to not see Top Flight on for 5 more weeks and then see him again somewhere. That's the mistake I think AEW makes. Capitalize it, or at least let it go for another week and see before maybe you take them off the road for a week or two. But this is, I was surprised by it.
I was too.
But when it happened, I was like, okay, cool. That's a formula that has to happen at times, and I think they pulled it off really well last night.
Yeah, I do. I think they did, and you're right, because there's this kind of position that you can be put in, and we just talked about Jay Lethal, and it really is. You're put in a position of a glorified jobber. Like at this point, Jay Lethal lost. They lost the tag. Was it like Rampage's? They lost the tag championship opportunity against the Acclaim.
Mm-hmm.
Then they turn around and do the same thing at Battle of the Belts. Don't ask me why. It was like, and then they do the same thing and put Jay Lethal in the ring again on Dynamite to lead. Like, great. Jay Lethal's a great worker. He makes people look good. He looks good. However, when was the last time that crew, Jay Lethal, Sanjay, and when was the last time they got a win? So I'm like, now it really does look like every time Jay Lethal rolls out, it's just like this platform. And they have, I think the interesting part about this is that they have these kind of stars that are really in the mid-tier, that they get a lot of work. So Top Flight's gotten a lot of work. They hadn't gotten a lot of wins. And you're like, they at some point, if they're going to be the up-and-coming crew, they've got to start getting wins. And
Top Flight almost seemed like they were going the ways of Varsity Blondes, like on there all the time, but they weren't even sniffing,
not getting wins.
It's not even sniffing victories.
And I kind of feel like they're trying to do this thing with Ethan Page, but Ethan Page has got to get some wins if it's going to work, right? You got to figure these things out. I was surprised about Action Andrade, not because of his talent, but because it was like the introduction. Like this was his introduction to AEW was beating Chris Jericho. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, there's a whole lot of Lee Moriarty's of the world that are like that have been there and still haven't gotten like that signature win, if you will. Right?
Yeah, Andrade sort of taken that sort of like Wheeler Yuta, like almost like rocket ship beginning.
Yeah.
And Wheeler Yuta is succeeding. He's not thriving right now.
He's not over.
He's in a great faction, but he's marginalized now, and
And I wonder if it is like almost like you hear about like these legendary like kind of Vince McMahon type tests. Like you get 1 week to see if the crowd reacts, and if it's not, you're like buried. And I think about Yuta, and I was like, they gave him that like really long promo with MJF, and like kind of like this back and forth, and I think even a match. And it was like after that, it was straight downhill. So it's either like sink or swim in this business. Either you have it or you don't type thing in many ways. But, I just don't know. I don't know. Because here's the thing. When Top Flight went over on the Young Bucks, do you feel like the crowd was with it? Like, do you feel like the crowd was like, I mean, I know they were happy for Top Flight, but do you feel like this is like an Acclaim type wave? Like the Acclaim is a great story about how this.
No, Acclaim has that extra ability to entertain the crowd that Top Flight hasn't found yet.
Danhausen,
right? Because it's a mix of you got to be acrobatic in the ring if that's sort of what you're looking for these days, but you also got to connect with the fans in a better way and get them involved. And Top Flight just doesn't have anything yet that really is drawing them. They are a better set of performers than the Gun Club is, but the Guns, to their credit,
Guns are next.
Are doing better.
On a rocket ship. Yeah, I think they're on a rocket ship. I think people like Top Flight, one of the great things, even though I don't exactly know where it's going, but putting Stokely with Ethan Page, I think was fine. Like get Stokely to have like a stable that's really awesome. and people that he can talk for. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you probably, to be honest, and you and I have talked about this in the past, you probably don't need a mouthpiece for Ethan Page. He's great. He's
Yep.
great on the mic.
Yep.
But Top Flight definitely needs a mouthpiece, right? Top Flight definitely needs someone that can kind of speak for them and make them who they need to be. And so I was interested in this kind of development, though, of trying to figure out like who's going to be the next folks, and is the crowd going to be with them? Because here's the thing: they've pushed Jungle Boy around the crowd for a long time. I'm not sold that the crowd loves Jungle Boy.
There's hand waving, and there's probably a small section of the female contingent of fans who like him, but no, I don't think he's gotten as universally over as
like
one would suspect.
Darby's over.
Yes.
I think, now a lot of people argue with me about this, but I think the crowd reacts to Sammy. I love Sammy.
I do too.
I think, there's some folks that I think I put Sammy way too high, but I think the crowd, Sammy gets a reaction out of the crowd.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just mentioned them. Yuta. I think Garcia, not there yet.
No.
I would argue that Daddy Magic and Angelo Parker might get a bigger reaction out of the crowd than Yuta and Daniel Garcia.
Oh, for sure. Just their interaction with the crowd is better. It's got a little bit more heat to it. A little more. It does. Yeah, Garcia. It looks a little more forced with Garcia in the same way. In the same way that like
he's not a good talker.
No, Garcia's not a good talker. Same way Hager's not a good talker either. Same way Hager has interacted. Well, Hager has found new life with that hat.
That hat has gotten him over.
But that, Garcia doesn't have. Garcia should have taken the hat. If Garcia had ran with that hat, it might have been different for Garcia.
Right.
Yeah.
Hager ran with the hat.
Yeah. Some of this is just you need time for it to sort of just reveal itself. And yes, so what would be great, and I'm getting a little impatient about it, is like that whatever Ring of Honor ends up being, that can be even AEW is more pro wrestling than WWE is, clearly, and they do that by design. Ring of Honor can end up being some even like more pro wrestling than AEW. That's where guys like Wheeler Yuta, Daniel Garcia, Jay Lethal sort of being near the top of that division again. That's where I personally would like to see Ring of Honor find their lane as even like a subset of the pro wrestlers, which is even like your Daniel Bryan type stuff. Takeshka goes there. A little more character driven on TV. I kind of want to see my Danhausens on Dynamite. I like to see my Sammys. Yeah. I like to see. Yeah, I mean, I want to. That's why I think Claudio is a great Ring of Honor champion. I want to move some of that. If Ring of Honor could be even like a more wrestling product than AEW, that's where I think Ring of Honor could find its niche and success. Probably online and then in pay-per-view.
We're jumping over a little bit, but I do want to ask you. You mentioned Takeshka, and it seems like he's gotten a very big push the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of beefing with MJF, getting a big match against Bryan Danielson. The interesting thing about him is that they let him talk, which I think is genius. But clearly he doesn't speak English very well. That's part of the stick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do we go with this? Like, they clearly are high on him as a talent. They let him do like promos. Like, what are we doing? Because I don't even know if he's kind of in that category that we just talked about with these guys that are kind of stuck in the middle of neutral.
I like to see Takeshka continue to be sort of a disruptor. Like, he has these he shows up, he cuts that kind of promo that he cut on MJF. Keep him around. He's also right now with guys like Minoru Suzuki not appearing even semi regularly anymore. I think he's a good sort of placeholder to have to remind people that, hey, we're still invested in this Japanese sort of crossover. He's a great Japanese star to have in AEW. and the fact that he still travels back and forth and competes somewhere over there. So I like the fact that he's there because I think he does have a future. Because man, that guy can go.
He really can.
Yeah, I do see Takeshita hopefully as a champion, but like the spring into the summer, we'll see if does he actually get into a feud or does he become sort of like this bandito sort of like every couple of months he'll appear, but more Takeshita I think would be a good thing for AEW to keep that highway to the far east because you're going to have another Forbidden Door at some point.
Sure.
So letting them know that we are still we still want to bring some more Japanese talent over. We have Takeshita here kind of full time, and having him as a disruptor who can go in and put on bangers with anyone and ruffle the feathers of an MJF or get under Bryan Danielson's skin or Moxley's skin or mess with the House of Black at some point. Sure, Takeshita is a star that they ought to invest in.
Well, what do you think of Kushida? Last night's main event featured Darby Allin versus Kushida. I know Kushida from NXT fame.
Yeah.
However, he is even a bigger star in New Japan. Represented the LA Dojo. Those guys came out with him last night.
Mm-hmm.
We knew it kind of did what we knew it was going to do. Very Forbidden Door-ish. Really good match. Darby Allin wins. Everybody gives standing ovations and high fives after the match. A lot of show of respect. They did kind of signal that they're going to do it again down the line sometime, probably pretty soon. What do you think of the debut of a very popular Kushida?
Yeah, anytime in the last couple of years when WWE has made a big splash with a signing of like a Japanese star, whether it was Kenta, who was Hideo Itami, and then having Kushida, to see those guys show up on AEW like a month or two after being released, it's always cool. You've been saying this for a while. Like we're waiting to see who the next Cody Rhodes is, who's the AEW star to go to the Fed. That idea has seemingly gotten even a little bit murkier lately because of Vince. So like who knows? But it was cool. Like I don't expect would need to see Kushida on regularly. Kind of, I feel the same way a little bit about Bandito. I like him because, and I say that only because there's so much established talent there that they're not utilizing. That this drip of like, it can't be just week after week of debuts. Like, I could sit and rattle off so many names that are just like, if they're getting time to rest, great. But like, we can't go too long before we gotta see Keith Lee back again. I've given up hope on Miro. I mean, totally given up. Next time he shows up,
does he show back up in the Fed? Like the two I think is Miro and Andrade. Do they show back up?
Yeah,
Triple H led WWE.
That would be, if they're looking to resurrect their wrestling careers, that's a better place for them to do it.
But the issue is with Big Daddy Vince back.
Yeah.
All the doors could be shut there.
Did we talk about this last week? I guess we have. I'm most happy. Oh, we didn't. I don't think we did Thursday show. I'm most happy that Adam Cole made a return last week.
Adam Cole is back.
I do want to bring that. Didn't want to not bring that up. Adam Cole had a really hot LA crowd last week. Yep. Welcome him back. Seemed as though he's healthy. He's probably not going to jump back in the ring for a little while longer, but if he is showing up regularly, get himself back into a situation where he's going to be a top contender. AEW, I think, needs Adam Cole, and Adam Cole, I'm glad that he is seemingly going to stick with them. He was a very, very welcome return. They need to get him back into the fold for sure.
I was really, really happy to see Adam Cole back. I do, still thinking in my mind what could have been with Red Dragon, Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly as well. I would have loved to seen them as a stable stay together and kind of run their own kind of rough shot, even kind of counter to the elite. But I do, I just welcome Adam Cole as a really great personality, great wrestler, can do banger matches if he's healthy. And, the thing about AEW has always been there. It's the wrestling's always there, man. The wrestling, maybe even they might, as you were talking about, kind of the wrestlers company at this point, as opposed to the WWE. They might even do it too much. They might have too many 25, 30-minute matches where you're like, man, you could get more people in on the 2 hours if you made it a little bit shorter, right? So I'm with you. I'm ecstatic to see Adam Cole back. Really interested to see where these storylines go, because they're really putting. I keep harkening back to that list or that runoff in the first promo of MJF, where he mentions the Adam Coles of the world. He mentions the Eddie Kingstons. He mentions these folks, Bryan Danielson. He mentions these folks that we were kind of thinking this might be setting up his pay-per-view kind of run.
Mm-hmm.
Hasn't 100% come to fruition just yet, but I'm interested to see where this goes. So MJF did make an appearance last night. We should talk about that just a little bit. He shows up at, what was it? Was it the end of the did he show up at the end of the Danielson match or the Ricky Starks match?
The Danielson match, but then he was backstage with Ricky. He was backstage with Cage after that match. Yeah. So yeah, he came out and taunted Bryan, but then he was appeared backstage with Gage and made a little offer to him to take him out next week, because I guess they announced Danielson and Gage. Cage will be his next Bryan's next competitor. MJF offered him an envelope full of cash to win or lose, didn't matter to him, just hurt him. This storyline's being fleshed out with Bryan having to take on all these, get through past all these challenges in order to get MJF next month at the pay-per-view. Cage is going to be the next one. Big, muscly man who's got the extra incentive now to hurt Bryan Danielson. So, that's going to, I guess, come to fruition in February with the match.
Do you like how they're using MJF right now?
How they're using MJF? Yes, I think it is. I think for his character, it is someone who is supposed to show up and be, it's not about the actual match. There's less about the actual match. And it's just showcasing his personality, which anytime you can showcase MJF's personality, let him run with it. He's the best heel, maybe in a generation, maybe in a couple of generations. He says the right things every time. He looks the part. He acts the part. He's a fantastic heel. I hope he has a very lengthy run and has some really worth this feud building with Bryan Danielson has been fine. I hope we shouldn't expect to see a title change, which we probably won't. But what he's putting Bryan Danielson through over these weeks is similar to kind of what he did with Jericho, facing different competitors. Danielson just has to go on a winning streak, which he'll undoubtedly do. But Danielson is so good at making the match look like it's slipping from his hands and then coming back. Right. It's, and we'll see what he can do against a guy who he can move much better than, but who is a really probably tough, stiff guy in Cage. So I like how this is going every week. I actually
love Cage. I love Cage. I think what Cage has done since he's come back with the firm and kind of real, I think he's really the Wardlow match. Like, Cage has been stealing a lot of matches in my mind by showing off of his athleticism after being as big as he is. So I am all in for Cage. I think that him and Danielson will do a great match.
I'm really curious if the stakes get really high, like in the the last 2 weeks leading up to this pay-per-view, if MJF's going to throw some really weird wrinkle in there and really make him have a, does he, who knows if he forces him to go against maybe like even Claudio or, maybe another surprising star. But I like everything that MJF is doing right now. I have for months. And
you have. You've been unapologetic in your love for MJF. Let me hit you with a couple quick ones before we start to wrap up.
Yeah.
Ricky Starks did pick up a win over Jake Hager in the hat. At one point, we always talk about this. At one point, it looked like Ricky Starks was on the rocket ship to some title. I don't necessarily see that path right this second, but do we still like the trajectory of Starks? He's still very much over with the crowd.
They are. I mean, he's definitely a B storyline, but he was a C storyline before. So
I think he's an A with the crowd. I think the crowd loves him.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't get quite the insane reaction that others get. I think he is still once of a blow, but he is someone they're obviously focusing on for what? Again, little unclear. I don't see him ready to main event a pay-per-view against MJF yet, but
what about the All Atlantic title in an Orange Cassidy type match with Ricky Starks?
Man, if Orange wasn't sort of the right now with Orange Cassidy being champion, and I love it because I love OC, it is almost still a match and a segment that still is featuring a fair amount of comedy too.
Sure.
Also, because you're having best friends, you're having Danhausen as part of it too. It's great. It works. It almost seems to me like that TNT title, for me, Ricky Starks and Darby Allin, with maybe even Ricky Starks getting the win over Darby to capture his first title, makes more sense than OC right now to me.
It's a more serious title based off of how they're making that TNT title work. Let's let's talk about what most of the world's talking about in the women's division, pretty light women's division kind of scenarios last night. However, I guess the big kind of question mark everybody has now is Toni Storm and Saraya basically turning heel. Or it was a heel turn for Saraya. Sheeta's on the outside of the ring, kind of like, I don't know what's going on. Saraya seems to be kind of the puppet master that's kind of telling Toni Storm, hey, we don't need these people. We were in the WWE. We're kind of bigger and better than all the homegrown type stars like Willow Nightingale. What'd you make of Toni Storm versus Willow? You don't really have to talk about the match because that wasn't what we were talking about, but like this trajectory that probably will lead to some type of mystery at the pay-per-view. Everybody's still hoping that mystery is Mercedes Moné, aka Sasha Banks. But where do we think we're going with this? Jamie Hayter, Brett Baker, Saraya, Toni Storm, Sheeta's in there, and possibly a surprise.
Yeah, this Saraya Toni heel turn sort of began a few weeks ago with them sort of marginalizing Sheeta.
Yep.
Sheeta is definitely a face and is over with the fans. So and having them finally kind of make the full heel turn by attacking who is a beloved babyface right now in Willow was a great move to do. So again, I don't know whether or not Saraya and Toni are sort of done with Jamie and Britt right now. I'm not sure where that goes.
No, I don't think so, right? That's the pay-per-view match. What's the pay-per-view match?
Is this pay-per-view? Is there another? Is there another like surprise tag? I thought.
No, it was supposed to be surprise partner for Saraya, and she chose Toni Storm over Sheeta. In our minds, remember, we thought somehow Sheeta hurts Toni Storm, and that opens up another.
So the upcoming pay-per-view, what's on tap for? Do you think it's going to be like Saraya versus Jamie or Toni versus?
No, right now it's scheduled right for Brett and Jamie versus Toni and Saraya.
That's still going to happen. I thought didn't that tag team happen last week? Isn't that why Saraya picked Toni for that match?
I thought it was going. I thought that was going forward. I thought that was still.
We'll have to check again. The fact that neither one of us know this right now means it's a little muddled. It's a little muddled, but I thought that surprise. I thought they were going to have that Saraya's surprise tag team partner was revealed before the match because Saraya ended up picking Toni as her partner. So there is not another surprise coming up. I think that has now flushed out. I could be wrong. We'll double check on that and update you, of course. But
it's fine. It's fine.
Saraya, I wonder if it's possible that Saraya or someone in the back said, Saraya, you may not be 100% ready. How do you feel about maybe going back to some sort of managerial valet role, or leader of a faction role? I want Saraya to get in that ring and compete if she wants to, if she can. If she can't, I still want her in front of the camera in whatever capacity because I like Saraya. So if she's going to put together a faction of like you said, Tony Storm. Now, if she wants to bring bring in ex WWE women wrestlers, that means Ruby Soho has to turn heel at some point and join that. I'd be all about that. Although the violence of the last few weeks would suggest that Ruby does not want to sort of align herself with Tony and Saraya, right. But anything could happen.
And there was a very subtle, kind of Ruby, really? Like, what are you doing when she came out to protect Willow Nightingale? Kind of like, aren't you supposed to be with us? Which would kind of imply that they're kind of old WWE folks.
There could be, but if we get a handful of weeks of Sheeta and Willow, or Sheeta and versus Tony Storm, or Sheeta versus Jamie Hayter, I'd be all about that. No
matter what they do, in my mind, it's only bold for when and how Mercedes Moné shows up on AEW TV. And it's got to be a pay-per-view. It can't be a regular situation.
Yeah.
She showed up in New Japan. She's going to wrestle this month in a New Japan show. Like, it's only so that means she's contractually free in that sense. So she should be able. It's only a matter of time. The question is how you do it and who do you put her in the ring with. And I think, because of historical context and who we are and how this works, I think when she debuts, she gets right in the ring with Saraya because of the injury and all of that to make it a thing. But that's where we are, man. I guess I am with you. I do think it's a bit muddled, but all roads to me lead to Mercedes Moné.
As the heel turn by Saraya would certainly sort of prime the engine for that. You want to have a real heel Saraya, because if and when you plan on debuting Mercedes, it is Saraya who should be the one that she faces.
Yep.
And she's going to be so over that you want to have someone that you're going to get that's been drawing a lot of heat lately. So that does begin to make sense. I've sort of been the feeling of, if Mercedes wants to join, she feels she felt too big for WWE. She feels she's too big for AEW. I think
she
know.
likes to wrestle, and the whole idea is she wants to wrestle on her terms. She's too big for all these companies, but she needs to wrestle. She wants to wrestle, and I think if she can do it on her own terms, that's what the key is here. Mercedes
and Jade would be fire.
It would be fire. Elliot, let me do this. I had a perfect way to send us out. It just came back to me because I'm kind of scattered all over the place, and but I will say a perfect way to go out is obviously mentioning some more, and we do this every week, but some more success from our good friends over at the Wrestling Club. Clip of the night, if you haven't seen the kids' reaction to Carmelo Hayes wearing the Wrestling Club sweatshirt on NXT television, it is amazing. It's chef kiss. It's delightful. The joy that those kids have under the leadership of our friend Victor is amazing. The reaction that they've gotten. I know, Elliot, you have a Wrestling Club t-shirt or sweatshirt. It's awesome, but they're popping up everywhere now. They're popping up on wrestlers. They're popping up on celebrities. They're popping up all over the place, and it's great to see.
Yeah, so Carmelo Hayes, and possibly even big, Will Ospreay wearing a Wrestling Club sweatshirt on his Sessions podcast with Renee Paquette. That was huge.
It was pretty funny.
That was my pop. That was my pop of the week.
Those are always
at Wallflower Perry. Victor, we love you, man. I'm gonna have you on the Tuesday show again. I'll be contacting you. But that's our guy.
It's always great to see good things happening to good people. And we'll be back. We got a hard out right now. We've gone just about an hour. AEW, there's a lot of kind of it's an interesting time because there's a lot of potential in the future, a lot of up in the air, but they're starting to flush out some things, and we will be here for it. Check us out every Thursday. Follow us on Twitter at WCWF Pod. Make sure you follow the podcast. Hey, look, we're going to have to count this thing out, Elliot. You ready?
Let's do it.
1, 2, 3. Until next time.